Return, O Virgin Daughter of Israel, to these your highways by which you went. Welcome to Reunion Roadmap, a place to discover the people and communities along the highway of restoration for Israel's House of Joseph. Reunion Roadmap is a B'nai Yosef North America production. Be our guest for the next hour as we meet the people of the emerging House of Joseph here in North America. Hello, this is Fanny Pappas with B'nai Yosef North America, and with me is our Executive Director, Al McCarn, and this is part 2 of our interview with somebody who's going to be a member of the family and will be a member of the family by the time they probably hear this program. Isn't that correct, Al?
Well, that's right. We're talking to Caleb Cohen of Kingsport, Tennessee. His brother Ben is about to be my son-in-law. And as you heard in the first half of our interview with him, he told us about his growing up, his youth, and going to college at Clemson University, crisis of faith in his sophomore year, how he came back because, the Lord drew him. And I would say also, because Caleb has a similar story to mine when I was young, he has some powerful praying parents and grandparents. Mm-hmm. And that helped. And the godly upbringing of the home made sure that he didn't stray too far. But now we're going to hear what happened next. And as you will find out, this is an even greater crisis of faith. In the cliffhanger we left last week, he was talking about theological issues, the difference of speaking in tongues, which was not something of his experience growing up. So where did that go? What was the unintended consequence of his investigation? Then, Stefania, I will be very interested in the second half of the program to hear your impressions on the Midrash, which David and Barry have entitled Spiritual Warfare. That's something that you've probably had more experience in than I have, but listen to Caleb's testimony with that in mind. He's going to talk a lot about what he was walking through with Megan, now his wife, and listen for what might be the spiritual elements involved, the spiritual forces of light and darkness that might have been guiding his steps. Now, along the way, we are going to have some good music as usual. This time we have Will Spires singing appropriately, Full Scale War, and then we'll get Kelly Ferrari Mills in the second half with her song El Shaddai, Song of Praise, singing about our God, our mighty God. So we have a good show. We will be back on the other side, but for now, let's go on back to Kingsport, Tennessee, and finish our visit with Caleb Cohen.
I started to have questions about certain theological issues, specifically speaking in tongues. As I sat down and tried to research it, I started with the Bible, and I couldn't find what I was looking for there. It was too ambiguous for me at that point. So then I went to the internet, and I started my search there with Christian sources. Unfortunately, at the time, whatever I read didn't satisfy me either. And as I was searching online, I started noticing these other websites. The problem was they weren't remotely Christian websites. They were atheist websites. And basically, the progression of thought went from, well, this is confusing, I need to find answers, to, well, these people are saying it's confusing and no answer makes sense because the whole belief system is faulty. And that opened a wave of doubt. It was a domino effect. I jumped from one issue to another, never really resolving any issue, but building the angst and anxiety that came with the questioning of each issue as it came up.
So let me ask you, these latter sources, websites that you were consulting, if you could put a label on them, how would you describe them?
I can think of one in particular that probably summarizes a lot of what I was reading. I wasn't reading the angry atheist, Christians are stupid, none of that. It was more along the lines of the friendly atheist, or the, I can't remember the website, is the unexpected atheist, or basically people who claimed that they had been in my situation, they had at one time had belief, and the more that they examined things, the more they realized that there was no basis for what they thought they believed. And at one website in particular, the writer basically claimed, I did not want to become an atheist, but the more I looked into things, the more I found myself becoming an atheist because the logic spoke for itself. And that is where the fruit of what was sown in college came to bear.
Let me throw out a disclaimer here.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, regarding in the Enlightenment, yeah, you're looking at humanist, rationalist thought, the unadulterated human without the Christian underpinnings. I mean, Christian humanism are godly, biblically based humans in the image of God doing as we're supposed to be doing. That's one thing. But you're talking about, say, Rousseau or Voltaire, the ones who say man is the measure of all things.
Right.
That's okay. So that's one disclaimer. Now the other, regarding speaking in tongues, we're not here to debate that issue. But what I'm hearing you tell me, Caleb, is that for some reason you went from consulting the scriptures to consulting those who have a relationship with Jesus or with Yeshua, Christian sources, finding out that there are conflicting answers, which is not necessarily a problem. Okay, there are different ways to look at the scriptures, but then you went outside the family, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, why? What attracted you?
Well, ultimately it came to me in the thought of, I need to know the truth no matter who is telling it. That, I think, is the thought that got me in the most trouble, which on the surface, it sounds pretty noble, right? I'm going for the truth, wherever it is, no matter what I have to lose. I got to find out the truth. And I guess I got so sick and tired of the back and forth in the Christian circles and the name calling, and ultimately, I guess, in certain instances, the logical fallacies that were being made in claiming positions that when sources floated along onto my screen that spoke my language that had been cultivated in college, it was hard not to go to those.
Yeah, and again, you would make the distinction here, finding the truth or looking for the truth, even though it can be uncomfortable. Yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
But it sounds to me that where you ultimately ended up, you've just said what seems to be a contributing factor here is people who claim to be following Messiah Yeshua or Jesus Christ and don't seem to be acting like it.
Yes, that was a huge factor.
I don't think any of us are immune from that. I mean, you talked about in your freshman year at Clemson, your isolation leads you to some spiritual pride there. And that's probably what contributed to some of the unpleasant things you saw and read on the internet, where brothers and sisters in Messiah are saying things about others they shouldn't be saying.
Sure. Yeah, that was a factor. I guess one of the other factors for me was people on both sides claiming the divine position on the matter. And knowing that the two can't disagree and both come from the same source, which was disillusioning. Yeah.
Disillusioning. That's a big word, but I think it's a powerful word, Caleb. Because I think a lot of people can understand that. We could throw in another big word, hypocrisy, of which, by the way, none of us is immune.
That's absolutely right.
So all of this is weighing down on your mind and on your spirit. And here you are by yourself in Kingsport, Tennessee, just starting a job, and it's being thrown at you like this. How'd you respond?
Not well. And you mentioned my job, which is funny because it did impact my job too. It impacted everything. Although I don't think I would have claimed it at the time. In hindsight, it brought on depression. Nothing made sense. There was no right answer. In my mind, as I was working through things, on one side, the atheist, godless arguments were making sense. And so I didn't want that. I didn't want that to be true. And that was a point of pain. And then knowing in my mind that if I concluded that was right, that I would have to turn my back on not only everything I knew, but everyone who was in my life, who loved me and supported me and had taught me all these things and cared for me. That was a hard place to be. But ultimately, you mentioned seeking the truth is not always a bad thing. I agree with you. Ultimately, that is, I think, part of what helped. I say part because I believe that it was God that brought me back. Things were bad. At that point, Megan was in Kingsport staying with someone from the congregation. She was working a summer job. She just moved up, and we were talking at that point a lot about getting married. And she basically moved up and met me, and I said, so about our plans, about where I am, you're not going to like this, but, and I can't give her enough credit. And I also believe that God was working through her. But at that point she said, okay, well, I'm here for the summer. We can do what we can to try to find answers and to get help. And I'll talk with you. We'll get people to talk to you. And at the end of the summer, if you decide that this is the way that you're going to go, that might be the end of us. And we'll just have to be okay with that. But if not, we'll see what happens. So she was very patient, and that was very helpful. So summer began. It was time to get down to business. And again, seeking for the truth, I did not want to discredit the believing side. And so to that end, we were reading books. Obviously, we were reading the Bible too, and we were meeting with pastors, pastor at the Vineyard, associate pastors there, having conversations with family and others, friends, trying to go through the entirety of objections to the faith, which was just overwhelming. The summer progressed, and things did not improve. In fact, every time that Megan would read a bit of apologetics or think of something, a point, she'd come to me and just try to reason and discuss with me. And even though it wasn't right, I could come up with a million reasons why she was wrong, which obviously was not helpful to our relationship. But she was still patient. So the summer moved on, and it was getting towards time for her to leave. A number of things happened throughout the summer that, in hindsight, I looked at and was amazed by. But a part, I guess, that I'll focus on is we were reading the Bible, we were speaking to people, but we were also reading testimonies of others. And one book we read was called Not God's Type. And it was a story about a woman who was raised in a very educated family and raised with no religion whatsoever, no belief system. So she was more or less raised an atheist, not a strong-willed person, but belief was just not part of her life, and there was no reason for her to have it. And that book is her story of how ultimately she came to accepting the Messiah. The book resonated with me, but I still was not on board most of the way we were reading through the book. Megan and I had been reading that book every evening. We'd sit on the porch where she was staying and read a chapter and discuss it. And we went on vacation with her family and intended to read the book, but that didn't happen. We went to a beach house on Polly's Island, and obviously family time and the beach drew us away from that. So when we came back from vacation, we stopped through Greenville, South Carolina to see my brother, Ben, your future son-in-law, who was going to school and working there at the time. And we went to church with him. And afterwards, we didn't want to go back to work. So we went out to lunch, and we still didn't want to go out to work. So we went for ice cream. And the restroom in the ice cream place was out of order. So we ended up at a Panera Bread looking for a bathroom. And while we were there, I was looking at the corkboard, and I noticed a poster that had a quote on it. It said something to the effect of, "He is not a tame lion," which I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know why it was on a poster. I didn't even know what the poster was trying to say by having that quote there. I just thought it was weird, because I usually like to read whatever's in front of me while I'm waiting somewhere. So we left and went on our merry way, got back to Tennessee, and we unpacked and we're like, oh no, we didn't read it all over vacation. We should probably read a chapter tonight. So we sat down to read, and we were reading, and we turned to a new chapter. And at the beginning of every chapter, there was an excerpt from some form of literature that highlighted a point about the chapter that was about to be read. And when we turned to that chapter that night, the quotation was from The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. And it had that exact quote about the lion in it that I had seen that day. And that chapter was about how the book's author had been dealing with doubt and anger and not understanding why God was not the way they thought God should be. And that whole chapter was about her revelation that God is not a tame lion, but he's a good lion. That you cannot put God in a box, that you cannot expect God to act a certain way. So my jaw hit the floor when I read that quote, and Megan, of course, was like, "What is it?" I brushed it off. I said, "Oh, it's nothing. I just saw that quote earlier today," which she was confused. But my engineering mind and all the logic and rationalism that I had been thinking of all that time got to thinking about that and other things that happened that summer, and was thinking on the rational side, what are the odds that that exact quote would not only show up on a poster and also in a book that I happened to read that same chapter that day when I'm dealing with those questions? That was the kicker. It was God talking to me. It was a direct rebuke and comfort to me at that moment, and it broke me in a good way. It was there was no disputing that. We had meetings with others that summer, an elder and his wife from the congregation, and I had been softened at that point, that when we met and we got there and he dropped the Bible on the table. He's like, "All right, tell me what's going on." At that point, I had nothing to say except what I'd been struggling with. And at that point, I was ready to hear what he had to say. So it was time for Megan to go. She was leaving on a Saturday, and the Friday before, I left her early because I had a lot of thinking to do. And so I went home and I reflected and wrote down some of the things that had happened that summer. And I already knew the answer at that point, but I confirmed again that there is no going back. And this time it's not because, well, this is the way that I do it. This makes sense. It was no, because God spoke to me and said, "This is it." And I took him at his word. So I met her the next day and told her everything. And of course, she was just completely shocked. She thought that was the end, but it wasn't.
Now, a skeptic might say, wait, where's the rational argument here? What would you say to that kind of a question?
To that, I would say there's a verse, which I know skeptics don't like, but it's something to the effect of, in the reading or the writing of many books, there is sorrow, or something to that end. The implication is that knowledge is not only the answer, but that it can be a source of sadness and despair. And basically what I realized is that I could rationalize my way into or out of anything, and that did not mean that whatever the subject point was right or wrong. The mind is faulty, and I realized that.
That is a powerful realization, Caleb. And judging from my own experience, let me see what you think of this.
Sure.
It's something, once you have had such experience, something that you can't really explain to others. Is that correct?
Ultimately, I could lay out what happened in my life. I could tell you why it was relevant to me and how unlikely it was that it would happen, and it did. But you could still find reasons to doubt. You could still find reasons to say, well, that doesn't make sense, or that it's dismissible. But ultimately, it comes down to a relationship, and evidence is out there. I think it really depends on what you believe.
This is where I was getting to, and I'm glad that you got there a little bit ahead of me, because you just described a watershed moment with, of all things, he is not a tame lion. Great quote, by the way. But can you describe your relationship with your Creator before that moment and after that moment, and explain the difference?
Sure. Before that moment, it was, ironically, the core of my beliefs. Not my relationship, but my beliefs was founded upon everything that made sense. Biblical food laws, that makes sense. The Sabbath, that makes sense. The world created as it is, that makes sense. But where was God? At that point, I won't deny that God was active and that I trusted him at points in my life previously. But at that point of doubt in my life, everything that I was living was based on what I could reason in my mind.
And after that?
After that. I will not say that it's all completely 100%, I hesitate to use this word, but faith, oh, this or oh, that, or I just trust that this will happen or God will do this. I mean, I do, but it's a beautiful blending of spirit and truth is what I'm trying to say. The two work together. And again, I'll reiterate that I know that God is real and that he speaks to people and that he spoke to me. And because of that, I can see him in all the evidence that was the same evidence that I could not see him in before without him reaching out to me.
So then it's not a blind faith that you have.
No, I'd say not.
but it's evidence-based. Now, are you continuing to search for the evidence and search the scriptures and all?
I guess you could say that I appreciate it. So I guess you could say for fun, I'll watch videos every now and then that someone will present about certain points of evidence or certain philosophies that support the Bible and belief. But at this point, that's not the focus, I guess you could say.
One last question, Caleb, as we're coming to the end of our time. I'm sure that your family, your parents in particular, watched you walk through this crisis with a great deal of anxiety.
That is right.
Yeah. Is there anything that you could say to parents as what they might be able to do to help their children walk through such a crisis as you did?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of ways I could answer it. The one thing I would say to the parents is, as hard as this is to hear, as best as you can, you gotta give it to God. You can't have fear. I'm proof, and there are many others, stories way more dramatic than mine, that God can do what he wants in people's lives. He can bring back anybody. So there should be no place for parents to fear. The second thing I'll say is focus on loving them and avoid actions based on fear. My parents, I thank God we're not acting in fear. They expressed themselves. My mom was completely torn up. I mean, she would cry so much on Skype when we talked, but there was never any reprimand or harsh words from all of it. And that the expression of love and concern rather than rejection or anger was immensely helpful.
Well, that's good to hear, Caleb. And knowing your family as I'm coming to know them, I can say that you're godly people, and you had all the advantages of a godly upbringing. But lo and behold, it sounds to me like you still had to get to know your Creator yourself. And,
you can't live on your parents' faith.
That's it. That's it. And I think that's a great place to stop. You can't live on your parents' faith. So, Caleb Cohen, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
It's my pleasure. I hope that it speaks to someone.
And now the music of Will Spires from his album The Beauty of Holiness. This is Full Scale War. His music is available on cdbaby.com.
It's a full-scale war on the hard-turned sound by the living that's loud, and it's lit in the camp of the Lord. If the fire won't burn and the back stay turned by, in the struggle there'll be war. Let us fire inside, bring resurrection power, so let us help before the Lord. So when His truth comes in, new day begins. Truth is, we all want something, but an impure mind can't see. Like the bound up, sure when the vision is sure to let the captives free. But if we don't rise a holy righteous eye, how can I shift the sin and bring glory? We're talking about rise up, sanctify, line up and purge away that crisis thing. It's gotta start today. It's a full-scale war on a hard-turned sound by the living that's loud, and it's lit in the camp of the Lord. If the fire won't burn and a rock stays turned by, in the strength of their before, let us fire burn bright, as holy the light reign, resurrection power. When His truth comes and the new day begins, Babylonian robe, fire by the silver and a wind gold. You can't come to your soul, but a heart laid low before the Lord can truly be resurrected. Muster courage now. Whoa. It's a full-scale war. Kadosh le'Adonai, be of a ready mind now. Let a heart be pure, so let you fight one so the wicked boy trying to now. It's a full-scale war. We let you fight inside the holy light. Resurrection power when the truth comes in a new day beginning. If the scale them fall, let the fire burn bright in its holy light things. Resurrection power when the truth falls in a new day beginning. It's a full-scale war.
Hello, shalom. Welcome everyone to the Midrash portion of today's program. This is Barry Phillips, an elder with B'nai Joseph in Virginia, and fellow elder from Florida, David Jones, is with me. David, I trust you're well today.
Yeah, yes, sir. Doing good today, brother. It's pretty rainy here, but I'm staying dry.
Oh, all right. Sounds great. I have an observance that I'd like for us to discuss on this Midrash. A number of years ago, while still pastoring the last church that I was involved with, and this was a pattern of focus in previous congregations that I pastored as well, there was a lot of focus on spiritual warfare. We did a lot of research in that church congregation on our location's history. The East Coast of Virginia in particular is loaded with history, colonial history, Civil War, or as we say here, War of the Northern Invasion history, Native American history. There's just so much that goes on here and has happened in this location. And so we were trying to discern in our theory how to take our city for Messiah and what wrongs may in the past have some sort of spiritual implications currently. There was a theory that was espoused in those days that if you could heal your city of the spiritual traumas inflicted upon it and tear down these principalities and powers that were influencing your locale, that minds and hearts would be more free to receive the message of redemption and that there would be an outbreak of revival. David, in those days, we encountered all kinds of stuff. We saw pushback in a lot of manner. We saw people that were influenced by some means demonically, whether some in our audience, believe that in actuality or not. I can tell you I've seen things that are otherwise unexplainable. But after we got out of the church, after we started our local Torah observance congregation, it's like Hasatan took a vacation for a while. And the pushback was gone. And we were free to pursue the Torah. I don't know whether we were given a period of time that was a reprieve, whether we were no longer considered a threat and therefore, ho-hum and boredom as far as our adversary was concerned, those people are no longer doing anything, or whether we had hit on something that obedience to the word took the toolbox out of Hasatan's hand. Years later, now I understand and realize that it's not as if our adversary has gone on vacation. His tactics are different. So my question is, what does seeking to be observant of the commandments of our Messiah, how does that influence or affect the work of the adversary against us? Does it cause us to become a bigger threat? Does it, I won't say, I almost want to say, make us immune to some level of his attacks? Does it mean that we're no longer a threat to the community? What is your opinion on that? Where are we at?
Wow.
Help me out here a little bit, brother.
This is pretty tough, because I don't think there's...
That's why I asked you.
Much appreciated. I don't think that there's like an equation, some kind of formula. If you do this, then this is, all going to fall into place. I think a lot of our own personal actions have a lot to play in this. And to answer your question, it could be any or all of the above. And regarding the situation, we have choices to make. And there is a degree where obedience will eliminate a lot of the things that would try to come against us. If we're truly obedient.
We can pause there for a second. Then are you saying that even if we're unknowingly disobedient?
Yeah.
That we are opening up a door that would cause us issues?
I do. I do believe so.
Okay.
Because how many people are walking ignorant of the things of Yahweh, and they're walking in contradictory in certain areas of their life to the Word, and there are consequences to these things. We read all through the Torah. I mean, the big one everyone goes to is Deuteronomy 28, right? But it's all through the Torah where if we're walking in an area of our life that's contrary to His Word, then we are open to consequences for these actions.
Okay.
One could be as a means of discipline, but another could be in the means of we do have an adversary that wants to destroy you. I mean, the whole story like Balaam and Balak is not a single one line, this just happened once kind of scenario. I mean, Hasatan wants to destroy that which Yah has created. And to think that just because we're following what Yah wants, that puts, we're golden. Nothing's ever going to happen to us. Nothing bad will ever come our way. And we can't get in that mindset either, because look at Job. So we do have some things to walk in. And now it's never a bad idea to say when things are happening, is there an area where I need to repent? But that doesn't mean that everything that happens you have a direct involvement in. We do have outside sources, if you will, who do want to see the things of God destroyed. I mean, look at the spiritual hatred that comes against Israel and the Jewish people. That's a spiritual thing. And so we do have some warfare, if you will, involved in this. It's not like when we're looking for a demon under every rock. We're constantly looking at someone to blame for the things that are happening in our life. No, that's not it. But that doesn't mean that there are not things out there that do want to see us destroy ourselves.
So, keeping feast days, observing the Shabbat, watching what goes into our bodies, studying His Word, seeking to implement, the balance of righteousness and justice, those tzedakah of mishpat, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. The reattaching of ourselves to the covenant and expecting to be a part of the restoration that is coming creates in us a completely different focus that is more positive and progressive, what a term to be using there, to be more righteously influenced than looking for where's the darkness at. I got to get rid of this next devil here, and being suspicious of everything. To me, it is the idea of turning things to a positive intention as opposed to looking for the negative effects of things creates in us a more joyful life experience.
I can say that better. We're constantly looking towards the Father and looking towards His light and looking towards the path that he wants for us. I mean, if we're constantly looking for the darkness, we're always going to find more darkness. Where's the light?
That doesn't mean that we should be naive or gullible.
No, not at all.
Certainly, the Ruach HaKodesh would prompt us and warn us. Stay away from this. There's a red flag on this individual or this group or this situation. There is concern to be noticed in a given situation. So it's not as if we put blinders on and, well, hey, I observe Shabbat, so the devil can't touch me. I don't want us to be childlike and think that purity and innocence has suddenly ruled today, because we certainly still have our issues to deal with. I think that there is a deception that does need to be aware of, and that is that among those that have become Hebraically focused and to whatever level and degree that they have succeeded in doing so, then it gives us the right to judge the level that others who are walking this path have accomplished.
And that's a whole other issue in and of itself, because even that comes to a degree of pride.
Well, the theory is, David, that if Hasatan can't put you down, he'll push you forward. If he can't make you feel defeated and deflated, etc., then he'll push you into the other direction where you have pride and arrogance, where you walk in judgment against your brother. So while we may not be seeing classic demonic manifestations among people and more as many instances as it may be in the past, what we do see is vicious tongues and accusational conversations, etc., and that is just as effective as a demonic assault, because actually it is a demonic assault. It just shows itself up in religious robes as opposed to gross darkness.
Yeah, that's a great way to state it, Barry. They really are kin to one another. Yeshua, he cast out demons, but I don't see anywhere where he cast out soulish behavior. He called that to repentance.
Oh.
And so there's discernment that's needed there. It's like, instead of looking for a demon under every rock, some of it's just, no, you're submitted to the wrong thing, and this is you. This isn't, something else. This is you. And not to say these other things don't exist, because, we've seen things. But we have to learn to take responsibility for our actions and to make repentance for that. And then Yah will open the ways to see other things that we may need to.
Well, there is a spiritual warfare principle I learned many years ago that may be very appropriate here. And that is that it's not necessarily that you cast out darkness, but light disperses the darkness, or it displaces darkness. So we need to walk in the light as Messiah is in the light. And First Yochanan teaches us in doing so that we need to have right relationship with our brother. If we claim to be in the light and yet we hate our brothers, then we're lying and we're still walking in darkness. So if we want the adversarial's tactics and attacks to fail and to come to nothing, walk in the light. And let the light of Messiah displace the darkness that seeks to overtake us. That means walking in compassion. That means walking in deference to your brother. That means closing our accusational tongues. That means repenting of the areas where we have been judgmental of one another. Doesn't mean walking in gullibility or being naive or closing your eyes and sticking your head in the sand. Be aware of things, but at the same time, walk in discernment and understand when you're supposed to reprove and correct if you have a vital relationship with someone. And if not, then ask that Yah will raise up someone who does.
I think an important thing to mind in this is let it all be done in love. when we bring something like this, are we doing because we care, or are we doing so because, well, they're just wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And if we care about the person, that will greatly affect how we approach them, and that could mean all the difference in the world.
Wow, indeed. Well, David, seems like that we have run out of time again. We always seem to just get in the thick of things, and the clock stands against us. Folks, we would love to hear from you. Please take a few moments, send us an email, text, however you want to communicate. But you can reach us at reunionroadmap@b'nai-yoseph.na.com. Love to hear from you. David, look forward to you again next week.
Shalom, brother.
Shalom.
Here's Kelly Ferrari Mills singing El Shaddai from her album Comfort, Comfort My People, available at doorkeeperministries.com.
Have you ever considered the characteristics of El Shaddai? How he is altogether powerful and mighty, and yet tender and compassionate, kadosh, holy and set apart, and yet likening himself to a mother hen, longing to hide her chicks under her wings. In Isaiah 66, he says, "As a mother comforts her child, so I'll comfort you. You will be comforted in Jerusalem." El Shaddai, the holy mountain, you are our rock of solid stone. El Shaddai, the master potter, with great care you shape and form. El Shaddai, Shaddai, nurturing Father, let us stand all on your knee. As your voice, like rushing water, soothes your children into sleep. As your voice, like rushing waters, soothes your children into
Hello, this is Sophania Pappas with B'nai Yosef North America, and with me is Al McCarn. Al, this was a very interesting aspect that Caleb was talking about in the area of spiritual warfare.
Well, he didn't use those terms exactly in his testimony about,
Yes.
You could easily say it was an intellectual journey, investigating
Yeah.
the reasons for faith.
Yeah.
There were spiritual warfare aspects, and what Barry and David were talking about in their midrash on spiritual warfare is a thing that this Hebraic community writ large is beginning to awaken to or return to. Now, based on
Yes.
your experience, Sophania, in counseling and in ministry, what do you suppose were the spiritual forces at work in so severely testing Caleb's faith?
Well, again, it's talking about one of the big areas that the enemy attacks is in the mind, and it begins with different thoughts. A thought comes in there, and then you ruminate over that thought. And sometimes, if that thought happens to be a thought that is coming from, of course, another kingdom, pretty soon after ruminating over it long enough, if you're not discerning that it's actually coming from that kingdom, next thing you know, it actually begins to actually become part of your thoughts too. And that's where, the battle begins, and where I have to sort these things out.
We can influence the battle for good or ill. Now, it does
Absolutely.
help a lot to be aware of what's going on. And it
Yes.
also helps to be connected with those who are more spiritually attuned, because we all do have our different levels of giftings and sensitivities.
This
Hence,
is
we all
true.
need each other. Now, what I was hearing in Caleb's story is he had his wife, Megan, then soon to be fiance. He had his parents. He had his church leaders or congregational leaders. They were connected with him. And I might also say Divine Fellowship in Kingsport, Tennessee, they understand these spiritual warfare principles. So I think he was in the right place at the right time.
Yes. Isn't that something how the Father does that,
It certainly is. And then also, what do you think of the coincidences, such as just happening to look up at a corkboard and see he is not a tame lion? How do you account for those kind of things?
I mean, you hear that so often, many times, even in this whole area of, where we're battling with not against flesh and blood, and the Father will do that many times. It'll sometimes, if it's not a billboard, it's something like somebody that you don't even know in a store or something says something out of their mouth that actually speaks right to what's going on, and you're thinking, oh, what's going on here? They just said exactly what I've been grappling with,
Yes, that should be a clue that we are not isolated here in this closed material system, but there are spiritual forces at work all around us.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's going to have to be the last word. Once again, thank you for joining us on this show. And on behalf of Sophania Pappas, Barry Phillips, and David Jones, this is Al McCarn bidding you Shavua Tov, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you for joining us on Reunion Roadmap, a production of B'nai Yosef North America. Please come back next week for another visit with the people of the emerging House of Joseph here in North America.